of the Celebrate Day 366, the good Dr. Charlotte Smith and her team for their commitment, dedication, and leadership. If not now, when? If not here, where? And if not you, who? I'm sure this is a very familiar phrase many of you have heard in the past. I can't think of a time this is more relevant than what we here in Kansas are currently experiencing. In fact, the nation today as it relates to maternal and infant mortality. COVID-19 has unmasked racial bias in health that has been present for a number of years. Social unrest and racist practices by society towards Blacks and other communities of color have been exposed. Let me be clear, for many of us, this is old news. For some of you, this may be new. Why is that? Unfortunately, many Americans still live in isolated bubbles of community and make the statements that that only happens over there, that doesn't happen here, are phrases we often hear in select communities. Today, we celebrate Day 366. This year is the 4th annual community birthday party, celebrating baby's first year. It is a special event where the community celebrates babies who have made it to their 366th day and educate new and expecting mothers, fathers, caregivers, family members on infant safe sleep practices and infant mortality crisis in the state of Kansas. Initially started in Sedgwick County, this event has now expanded to Wyandotte County, again specifically targeting Black fraternities and sorority family members. Here in Wyandotte County, I've had the pleasure of working with Every Baby to One, a program that looks at safe sleep, safe space, and social support in faith-based communities. My purpose here is to call us to action, to exhort or stimulate you to do something in order to achieve an aim or deal with a problem. Don't we know the problem? So what is our aim? You will hear later the status of health, and the facts are clear. Infant mortality in Wyandotte and Sedgwick counties are the worst in the state of Kansas. And the state of Kansas itself is one of the worst in the country. This also impacts the behavioral and mental health of our mothers, our fathers, and our families. Today, we brought together men and women of the Divine Nine, members of each of the Black fraternities and sororities in our society. As educated men and women, we have an obligation and responsibility to lead by example. What are you willing to do? What is the price of maternal and infant mortality? Can we continue to almost allow one baby per month to die? What are you each willing to contribute, both personally and financially, to change? Are you willing to educate or bring awareness to your coworker, fraternity or sorority brother and sister, your neighbor, even your family member when you see inappropriate behavior? I'll share my personal story. When I started working with Every Baby to One, I learned in my church alone there were 16 women who had lost children before their first birthday. My pastor's wife was one of them. Our former mayor's wife is one of them. My own mother lost 2, and I did not realize that until 3 years ago. We're often told in our families, don't air your dirty laundry. Well, infant mortality has been kept hidden and has become a sickness in our families. Women are forced to bear both physical and mental burdens that they were not designed for. During the Civil Rights Movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, John Lewis, Julian Bond, C.T. Vernon, Whitney Young Jr., and many others of all fraternities walked together to effect change. I challenge you, will each of you in your organization have the courage to become agents of change? Are we just interested in a feel-good moment? Do we want to do good work, or are we willing to do what's necessary to have a significant impact? Significant impact does have our cost. Later today, you will hear from experts panelists who will share key statistics and information related to maternal and infant mortality in Kansas. As I close, it is time to take health equity and infant mortality off the back burner, out of the living rooms, out of the closets of people of color and families of our fellow fraternal brothers and sisters. We must put it where it belongs, front and center, and the cover story in our hearts and minds. Infant mortality is indeed a public health crisis that must be eradicated. This is necessary for the health of our families, our communities, both in urban and rural areas in our state and our country. If not now, when? If not here, where? If not you, who? Thank you and enjoy the presentations.
Thank you so much for that powerful call to action. Thank you. That is great. We need to have these discussions. These discussions are vital to our community, and we must make this normal for every individual to be able to talk about the traumatic experiences that they have, whether it's systemic racism or racial discrimination. We're going to have our first panel, which is the state of Black parents and the impact on the community. Welcome, welcome, and help me welcome our panelists to this event. We have with us Mr. and Mrs. Bronson Irvin and Angela Scott.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
We have Mr. and Mrs. Chris and Anya Scott with us. We have Mr. and Dr. Ray and Jalen Sims. Thank you. Reverend and Dr. Gary and Crystal Lumpkins.
Morning.
Good morning. All right, we're going to just jump right in and start our discussion. So our first question to our panelists is to help our audience understand concerns of the state of Black fathers and mothers in Kansas. In your opinion, share with us what infant mortality means to you and how it affects the community. I'll start with the Scott and Irvin family.
Thank you, Charla, just again for the opportunity to be here today as parents. You know, when you ask, you know, what does the state of, you know, Black women health and infant mortality mean to us? I think it means our lives. It means our child's life. I can say that as I consider a fairly learned member of the community, you hear statistics. Mr. Crawford laid out some statistics and it just rolled out, but they were staggering. One baby a month dying. That was many people I know that was their child. That could have been my child, that could have been me. So when, you know, you ask what this means to us, I think it definitely means that we have to be a part of this work, you know, for our lives. And so this work means advocating, right? Talking about access to care issues, speaking about our experience, feeling open, feeling like it's something I know when I talk to him about doing this. You know, I almost had to be like, you know, recall our experience, right? Because it's not normative for you to look at these things and call them out as problematic. And that must change, right? So this culture of giving voice to what the issue looks like and the concerns around women giving birth in this country.
Yeah, and I would say for our experience that from the time that you realize that a child is coming, there's already a fear associated with that because the woman has to get through the pregnancy with low stress, nourishment, and you have to go out into society to where people will stereotype you as a Black woman, especially if the father isn't present. They just give you a certain level of service based upon a woman carrying the child. And when the child arrives, you're still fearful because you still have to get that child up until the first 18, 24 months before you can feel comfortable. And just that whole process and just having to pay close diligence.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Now we're here from Mr. and Dr. Sims.
Hi, thanks for having us. What does it mean to us? Number one, death of an innocent child that could have been prevented. Sometimes due to lack of support for families, to find providers who will take their human lives seriously. Lack of resources that allows mothers and parents to get answers to their questions, or just get community resources, finances to allow for safe sleep environments, and of course, many others. Then of course, after the fact, there's a lack of ongoing support. It's like death happens, then everybody else goes on and does their normal activities while the person is still hurting, and the person has no resources to, pick up and move forward in life. And then from our standpoint, of course, I was in a hospital where I was known. And because of our status in the hospital, my care was expedited and I had great care. But what about the person who had public insurance, or the one that didn't know, or the one that wasn't known? I was a physician in my own hospital. But what about that person that is just the regular patient population that I take care of, with no one to advocate for them? It completely changes the situation. And so, like Angela said, what it means is that we have to be doing things like this, reaching out, advocating and teaching each other how to advocate for themselves, so that, our lives are not going to be at stake.
I think for me, it was a wake-up call, having a daughter that was in a NICU for 30 days. I remember prior to learning the gender of my daughter, I asked one of my good friends, what did he want to have when his wife was pregnant. He used to always say, I just wanted a healthy baby. At the time, I wanted a boy, and so
I wanted a healthy baby.
And so I didn't understand the meaning of that. So when she delivered early and she was in the hospital for 10 days, her vital signs was just going off the charts. I didn't know if she was going to live or not. And then I would go up to the next floor, have to check on my daughter. She had tubes coming out. It was really a tough situation, to spend. And I was exhausted. I remember sometimes just walking to the elevators to go home, to take a shower and come back. And so seeing the other kids, the babies in the NICU, seeing their parents that really, they didn't really have an understanding of what their child was going through. Some would come and just drop off milk and leave. There was a baby in there, last name was Sims. They had resuscitated him like several times. He went in and out. They had to do the procedures. His heart stopped working. It was just tough through that whole experience. So seeing that and experiencing that, it was a wake-up call for me, and it really enlightened me on what life means for not just the child, but for the mom as well, because I was facing the reality is that I could be raising my daughter by myself if my wife didn't make it. And so I spent nights, I think she was in there for 10 days, and it was just a tough situation to go through. And my daughter, just seeing her ups and downs that she had while she was at the NICU, I didn't know if she was going to live sometimes or not. So I just remember all that time, and it's very hurtful to talk about it and to think about it to this day. But seeing her smile every day and walk around the house is a blessing for me. So I definitely understand what immortality is for our children.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now we'll hear from Mr. and Mrs. Barnett.
Thanks, Charla, for the opportunity and the platform. I'm a huge advocate of Day 366, and I appreciate what you and Dr. Redmond are doing in our community. This is very important to us. We are the parents to 4 amazing, non-conforming, carefree Black kids. And so this hits us in our hearts. And it was a difficult journey for us as well. Not only was the pregnancy difficult for more than one of my pregnancies, for a couple of our births, it was very traumatic. When we think about the statistics, right, the United States has the highest infant and maternal mortality rate among developing countries. That could be a full stop right there. But actually for women that look like me, it goes further. The statistics for Black women are even more egregious. And so when you're thinking about having a child, Like BJ said earlier, not only are we thinking about the stresses of becoming a parent, you also have the stress of going into a hospital and not coming out. You have the stress of, like Mr. Sims said, possibly being a single parent from preventable causes. So this is very near and dear to our heart. We're very passionate about this, and we have to see these numbers and these cases improving, not just for me, but for my kids, for the next generation. We should not still be doing this in 20, 30 years, trying to figure out what's going on, what's the disconnect, why are we losing people if we are such an innovative and developed and pioneering country. We need to step up to the plate for all women, but especially for Black women.
She's right. But no, okay. Yes, this is very near and dear to us because I know personally, as a father, as a husband, the worry about going into a hospital and not knowing if your wife is going to come out or if your child is going to come out the hospital. Because I've seen, I mean, we were there, you know, with our last child, and it was chaos. And again, just from the moment that you find out that you're having a baby, you're on edge. You're on edge because you know that, like my wife said, Black women are not protected. They're not thought about like that. Black women go to the hospital and don't get the same kind of treatments as everyone else. And that is an absolute shame. And especially when, you know, Black women are pregnant. So now you're not taking care of Black women as you should, which then means you're not taking care of the baby coming as you should, which then is just stress for everybody. So as a husband, as a father, I mean, I'm like beyond grateful to see my wife go in and have kids multiple times and our kids be here healthy and kids as much as kids can be, but just the stress of the pregnancy and the care, it's a lot. And yes, the US is supposed to be innovators of technology and innovators of this and innovators of that. And somehow in 2020, there's no innovation to make sure that Black women can go in and just deliver a baby and everything will be fine.
Hello.
That's crazy. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that great insight and for bringing those statistics to our attention. Next, we will hear from Reverend and Dr. Lumpkins.
Good morning, Dr. Smith. As it was just echoed, thank you so much for allowing us to have this opportunity on this platform. Dr. Redmond, thank you for all that you're doing. I'll just echo a lot of what the sentiments that were shared. We are parents of 3 beautiful children and had very different experiences. We lived, the first was born in New Mexico and the last 2 in Kansas. And our first one, you know, first child, just a lot of issues. But I do want to make sure that I say back that the Barnetts were talking about, that it is unfortunate that we live in a country that, you know, is supposed to have all healthcare, all these different things. And we are seeing these statistics. It is just unimaginable, and it should not be happening. And as a public health researcher, I look at, you know, all the other disparities that we're experiencing. And if we look at the infant mortality rates, that speaks to life expectancy, that speaks to a lot of other things. And so we should be ashamed of ourselves. So, you know, just the infant mortality, especially among African Americans, is inexcusable. And so I just really appreciate this forum and 366, because I have to admit, I have been afforded opportunities. Like Dr. Sims, you said, we, you know, educated backgrounds, we were very proactive with trying to get the information we needed when we had our first and our other children, but still there was some gaps with the one in, you know, with Israel. So just again, really fortunate to be here and to actually, it's making me, okay, this is something I need to be a part of.
Oh, absolutely. Again, thank you for this forum. Wanting to center in on what I heard a lot of people say regarding stress especially from the male perspective, and the effect of this. And you probably know where from a spiritual component that I'm going to always look at how this affects faith in our community and all of that. What happens when you come home, when you expect to come home with a child and the baby seat is empty? The effects on the faith. The family doesn't show up for the family gathering. They stop going to church. They stop praying. They stop, you see the cycle. And so this togetherness and how it affects the community is drastic. We talk about knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge. But even when we don't have knowledge, many times, I mean, when we do have knowledge, like we said, the racial and other inequities just overcome us. And so that understanding of prayer and those types of things to help us cope, even in this time of racial injustice all over. Imagine with everything else going on right now, you having to deliver a baby right now, that's emotionally devastating, but God is where I'm gonna stop it right there. So thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, we are getting into the weeds. We have one more question. So I'll just ask that each group of panelists during this session give us a 1-minute response, but this one is pretty heavy. Institutional racial bias that claims Black people are not as sensitive to pain as white people subsequently influence the fact that Black women have the highest maternal mortality rate, dying at 2.5 times more than white women in 2018 and 3 times more than white women in 2019. Not to mention the racial unrest that our Black males must face. Until our country take the pound protect Black women and pound protect Black men to heart, it's the world against Black men and women. How do you feel about the Black women are strong stereotype? And what can we do as a community to protect our Black women and Black men? We're going to start with Mr. and Dr. Sims.
It makes me a little irritated about that, but let me just say something first. Black women are considered strong because of a lot of the things that we've had to endure over the years. But let's take it all the way back to slavery days, when the fathers of GYN were performing procedures on the Black slaves without anesthesia in order to critique and develop a lot of the surgeries that we do today. And it was because they were the strong ones. So you bring that all the way up, and we still have these same mentalities, which basically comes into our structural and systemic racism. And we say, well, when she calls out, she's fine, I'll go see her in the morning. Or, oh, just give her a little bit of pain medicine and she's fine. Oh, well, that's fine. She did lose a lot of blood in her surgery, so she's gonna be okay. And then by the time she's actually finally listened to, it's like, oh, she's near death. I should have came sooner. So the Black women are strong mentality, we really have to overcome by basically wiping out this systemic racism, because that's something that was developed years and years and years ago that we're just still doing to this day. So everything else has fast forwarded and become, more, innovative, but we still have that same mentality from what we had back in slavery days. So how do I feel about that? Hate it. I wish it was better. What can we do about that? We can advocate by, one, for me, because I am an OBGYN, making sure that the people that I am teaching, as far as our residents, making sure that they are actually listening to the patients when they call out. What else can we do? Empower our patients to escalate. So if the nurse doesn't come, then you call out and you ask for the doctor. Well, if the doctor doesn't come, you call out and you ask for the hospital administrator. I bet you'll get somebody to your bedside. Or for the person that's in the room, when he or she sees that the patient doesn't look well, running out to the nurse's station. Oh, you don't want to help me? Okay, we'll call for the doctors. Okay, call for the hospital administrators. Because sometimes that escalation is what's going to get someone what they need.
I think for me, I've had to be voice for women in my family. Grandmother died with cancer. And so I saw the care that they would give her. There've been instances where I had family members that don't come from an educated background like I do, but they had a loved one in the hospital. And I've reached out to her in the past and said, what kind of questions should they ask the doctor when they do the rounds? You know, so I've tried to be a voice for it. At the same time, I've actually gone in the room and with a no-nonsense look on my face just to be serious and just let them know that, you know, I'm here and I'm watching everything that you do. I'm being a voice for her, and I want to make sure she gets the best care anybody else is getting in the hospital. So the biggest thing for me is just to stick with what I feel that she needs or what may be needed for that situation. And I'm very open about how I feel about things when it comes to patient care when I'm the person that's involved with her or loved one. So I'm just being a voice.
There's even been times that before I went into the hospital, he and I would have a discussion, and I would tell him, like, this is what I want. So if I can't say it for myself, this is what I need you to tell them. And I remember one time they came into my room and something happened and he spoke up, and I was like, well, I don't have to say anything. I just kind of turned over because I knew that he had my back like that.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Now let's hear from Mr. and Mrs. Barnett.
When we think of the strong Black woman trope, we have to realize that that was created out of white supremacist notions. Others put that on us. We didn't put that on ourselves. And for the most part, we didn't assume that for ourselves. That's what they put on us to make themselves feel good for the deplorable things they did to us. If we just go back to the beginning, gynecology was based on the brutal torments of Black women. A lot of the innovations in the sciences that were pioneered through Dr. James Marion Sims were at the humanity of women, of Black women. And they were not treated like human. They were treated subhuman. They were treated as if they were nothing, no feelings, no nerve endings, no anything. These experiments were brutal, and they were it was a sad, sad, sad part of our history. And the fact that we're just now finding out the historical roots of this, of a medical healthcare system based on racist, white supremacist notions, it's time that we dismantle that, and that we realize we don't claim these tropes. They were thrust upon us. Additionally, when you think about it epigenetically, what our ancestors went through, these are things that are in our DNA that have honestly carried with us, and they're traumas that we are still dealing with. As a 3, 4, 5 removed generation from a foremother that came over here through the transatlantic slave trade, I'm dealing with that in my DNA. I am passing that on to my children in our DNA. So we have to deal with the traumas. We have to deal with the community violence. We have to deal with the community traumas that are happening. When you turn on the news, who's front page on the news? It's typically us. Our pain is fodder for American society. We are sitting here talking about Black Lives Matter as if we're nothing. We're sitting here trying to tell you that we're humans too. We should be respected and appreciated and valued. We matter. And our people are dying in the streets and in hospitals, and our kids are falling victims to schools and to prisons. And these are all determinants of health that influence how we get to where we are. It's more than taking your prenatal vitamins. It's more than just eat healthy and drink your water. It's, do I even have access to any of that? Is my doctor even listening to me? Do I have a grocery store in my neighborhood where I can get fresh produce, or do I have $50,000 Generals where I can get a bag of Funyuns? Do my kids have access to a quality education and a quality healthcare system? Do we have after school care? Do we have a village that takes care of us? Do we have a police department that will not inflict state-sanctioned violence on our families? These are all things that are factors that create these risks for Black women. We are pregnant and we are dealing with the stress of being pregnant, and then we have these outside stressors that are affecting our babies, their development, and whether we will survive. It is like survival of the fittest. And for us to be in this developed country, and that's what we're talking about, it's a shame. This country should be shamed. Our community should be shamed. These doctors should be shamed. Who's being held accountable? This goes beyond affluence. I know people who are very affluent. We all know people who are very affluent, and they're still falling victim to the same barriers that happen to poor women. The common denominator here is racism.
I really can't follow up after that.
That's fine. Thank you so much for that, Anya. You brought out all of the important points. Now we will hear from Reverend and Dr. Lumpkins.
Yeah, I was saying, I don't know how I'm going to be able to follow that mic drop, but I tell you, just looking at the Black woman, stereotype, there definitely has to be a lot of deconstruction because of what society has perpetuated, as you said. And the only other thing that I can think of, or just to say right now, is that, in that deconstruction, to look at how we can, now I know some people may disagree with this, but look at our vulnerabilities as a strength, meaning like all of us come together. We need each other, to basically say, I reject this, not saying that we shouldn't feel like we are empowered, but like you said, Ayana, I hope I'm saying Anya, how you said that this is white supremacist. Thank you. White supremacist, this type of, how can I say it, this perpetuated stereotype, to walk into who we know we are and walk in that truth of who we are and rejecting those things that they have placed on us. And I think that is going to, what is coming to my mind is some of mental health professionals have talked about that historical trauma that we hold in our bodies and being emancipated out of that and walking into our truth and that spirit of being African American and owning that and coming together collectively as a community. And one thing I was telling my husband before we got on here is that, and I hope I'm saying this, the term right, Ubuntu. I am because of who we are, and coming together and collectively saying, okay, my sister, because you are experiencing these things, I understand, coming from a point of empathy and coming together, share to collectively address some of these things that we have been fighting for years. Because it's not going to happen, address this overnight, but walking together to address some of these problems. Thank you so much.
Just a quick statement. This is an assault. The whole idea of women being strong is great, but what it says is men are weak, and especially in the Black community, men are not seen like Black women. So the family structure has been targeted on purpose. Where are men in jail? Where are, we can keep on and keep going down that road. And so we love the idea that our women are supported and loved, and that they have had to hold and maintain the family the way that they have. We thank God for that. But what does that say about the rest of the family or the rest of the societal structure to support her in that effort? So I would say that.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to move to the Scott Irvin family.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to really just add our 2 cents. I heard so many things that resonated with me when I think about Black women tropes and what the community can do to protect Black women. And so I want to reiterate one thing that I think can be a guiding light as we do this work and remain vigilant, which is, we all talked about the historical legacies of slavery, but we also need to understand the present legacy, and that white supremacy continues to permeate every system in our society. So that no matter how respectable you are, how much money you have, how much you do things the right way, at the end of the day, it's not coming out in your favor. And what the community can do is to always understand this ain't about us judging each other and our response to oppression. This is about us acknowledging at all times we are fish in dirty water, that the water is bad, the environment is permeated by a disease and a sickness that no one calls out. And so when I die, they asked me what kind of insurance I had and how many times I went to the doctor. And all of these rules of engagement, that if I didn't hop through it the right way, then somehow my death must be justified. My hands weren't high enough. I didn't say the right things. Whatever it is, our death will continue to be justified. What we must do to refute these stereotypes is to always defy that lie, to always call out white supremacy in its face. Don't call your sister and your brother a stereotypical trope born of white supremacy. Call out the thing. We have to remove the stigma that we put on Black mothers, put on Black fathers, that we put on systematic policies that put Black men in jail, that are now putting Black women and girls in jail, starting in criminalization of the school system. All white supremacy, and guess what? That's all in that baby's body when she gets pregnant for the first time. That's all in that baby's body when he creates a child for the first time, starting in kindergarten, starting in the womb. So we must always recognize the monsters that live amongst us. The first thing. I don't care about what other people call me. I care about how you see me and how you call me and how you rally for me. And how when I come to you telling you what I have encountered in this system, that you believe me and you listen and you advocate and you rally. And so what the community can do is that. To stop responding to white supremacy. I don't know if y'all didn't know that Sims was the man doing this stuff, but I did. I went to the University of Alabama when we walked on the ground across my ancestors who were experimented on by the man named after the biological building. If you're Black in this country and you don't know that everything you see that looks like something came out of your blood and your bone of your ancestor, I don't know where you've been. We have to always recall that. And then the last thing that I heard and want to continue to rally on is our healing. That even as we live in this muck, in this water, it is our job to always put the salt back in the water. We are saltwater fish put in a freshwater pond, and it is our job to put the salt back in the water. That is something that I heard and will always carry with me, and remember that. So even though we can't break the system down today, every day that you call a thing, face it, be who you are, persist, and do it for each other. Not to climb a ladder of white supremacy, but to, as I heard a sister say, get off that ladder and get into a thriving existence, an existence where we can birth our babies and they live. Because we're not stressed out all the time by white supremacy. It ain't your boss, it's white supremacy. It ain't the people at the grocery store, it's white supremacy. Call it what it is, and let's start demanding that power do something about it. Because I'm tired of your feelings and your ego and how you didn't know something, your overall will for ignorance, killing me, my children, my fathers, my people. So that's how I feel about the stereotypes and what we can do as a community. We can acknowledge the monsters that we fight, and you better get prepared to fight them. Get healthy, prayed up, prepared. You think they're not coming for you? You think they're gonna take something out of their children's mouth and put it in your mouth so you can live? You better be ready. And I'm not talking about how they're talking about getting ready in these streets. See, they talking about guns. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your internal health. Because every day you walk out here to live, there is some microaggressive stressor monster just trying to take you out of here. And like Lucille Clifton said, thank God that they failed. Did you want to say anything, babe?
Yeah, I'll add 2 cents. I can follow up with that, but I will say, just to answer the question, that I think sometimes the stereotype of a Black woman can be misleading because it dismisses the Black man. And when I see films like Tyler Perry and Medea and this strong Black woman, and
it's a man dressed as a woman.
yeah, and you know, it's always the weakness of the male figure that's present. And I think the Black family knows the role of each member's responsibility and knows the strength and weaknesses. And for one to be labeled as this, then the other has to be labeled or assumed as this.
Yeah. And that's why it's good just to damn all of that, because none of it is our construction.
Yeah.
So we don't have to assume any of that. We can throw all that in the trash and create our families to where they're sustained, to where they're not in competition between people in relationship, but towards the Ubuntu, the edification of the whole, the I am because we are. If you're sick, I'm sick, period.
And to follow back up what Mr. Sims said, is that what we can do to protect our women is by being present. So when there's a confrontation that she's not there battling alone, she has members of her family present, willing to fight that battle with her, or whatever challenge or difficulties come or presents itself.
Thank you so much. This has been a great panel, and while we don't have much time for questions, we want to make sure that we acknowledge that this panel is a panel of educated Black men and women who have had difficulty in birth or in the community, and they have experienced systemic racism. And we need to know that what they're saying to us today is we need to do better. Listen to Black women, listen to Black men. See, hear, listen, and respect Black women and Black men. And one more thing, Black men and women did not build systemic racism. Don't expect for them to dismantle it. We're going to move to our father panel, and we'll have questions as we all come back together at the end. Thank you guys so much for your inspiring words, for your passion, for your advocacy, and for your time in being here today. We love the work that you do. You make me look great with everything that you do, and I want you to stay on so we can answer questions and keep this work going.